The blood of the champion still steamed on the arena floor. Korzel is the undefeated warrior of the Shirani Empire, the one whose name had echoed through 100 victories. Now lay broken and still. The human stood over his body, his blade dripping, his breath calm, eyes locked on the Empress above. She did not speak. She could not. For the first time in decades, Empress Virilia felt the heavy taste of fear sitting on her tongue. Not fear of death. She had faced assassins and poison. No, this was something deeper. A loss of control, a crack in her power. No one had ever defeated her champion, and worse, no one had ever dared look at her like that. The arena was silent, as if the entire empire held its breath. Then came the sound of movement, not from the crowd, but from the royal platform. A slow, deliberate step echoed on the crystal stairs as the High Ordinator, keeper of ancient law, emerged beside the Empress. His long silver robes flowed behind him like liquid metal, his eyes glowing dim blue with cybersight. He bowed low before her. "My Empress," he said, his voice old and heavy, "by the code of iron and sand, Law 47, Section 9. The victor of the sacred duel may claim spoils." Virilia didn't respond. Her throat was tight. "Shall I recite the spoils as written by the founders?" the Ordinator asked softly. Her fingers tightened around the armrest of her throne. She had made that law centuries ago, to punish rebellious warlords and reward loyalty with fear. It was her law. Now it turned on her. The Ordinator stepped forward to face the arena.
Nice.
Voice grew louder, echoing across the Colosseum like a gong. "Warrior of Terra," he called. "You stand victorious over the champion of Shirani. As written, you are entitled to the spoils. The champion's blade, the title of First Blood, and the flesh and loyalty of the royal court." Gasps broke from the noble boxes. Some alien lords stood, shouting protests. One even threw a cup down onto the arena floor. The Empress raised a hand, and silence returned instantly. The human still did not speak. He looked up at the Empress, not with hunger, not with pride, but with a kind of sharp quiet that unsettled her more than any threat. She rose slowly from her throne. A dozen armored guards stepped forward, ready to defend her, but she waved them back. Her long black cloak swayed as she took 3 measured steps toward the balcony edge. "Human," she said, her voice clear. "Do you understand what has just happened?" The human raised his head slightly. Yes. His voice was calm, deep, and flat, like someone used to giving orders, not taking them. Virilia narrowed her eyes. "You have won, and by our law, I'm yours. As are the maidens of my court." Some of the maids standing behind her lowered their eyes. One, a young red-skinned woman with golden eyes, looked at the human with a strange mix of fear and curiosity. The Empress straightened her spine. "But know this," she continued. "You may hold my body by law, but you will never hold my soul." She waited for him to respond. Maybe he would boast, demand her surrender, make some crude show of dominance. But the human simply nodded once, then turned away from the corpse at his feet. He began walking toward the inner gates, the victor's path. The door opened for him without a word. The entire arena watched as he vanished into the darkness. Not a cheer, not a cry, only silence. Later in the chambers of the royal court, panic rippled like fire. The maids whispered among themselves, unsure whether they should fear, obey, or resist. Some spoke of escape. Others remembered the law and how violating it meant execution. Empress Virilia said nothing. She sat alone, staring at the floor, her mind replaying the moment over and over. That strike, that look she had ruled for 100 years. She had seen species wiped out, stars burned, planets broken, but never had a single being shaken her like that. And he didn't even want anything. That's what made it worse. He had power, but he didn't use it to take. What did he want? Who was he? As if summoned by her thoughts, the doors of her chamber slid open with a hiss. Guards tensed, but it was the Ordinator again. "The human has requested quarters," he said. "Requested?" she asked sharply. "Yes, Empress." He did not command. He asked. She stood slowly. "And what else?" The Ordinator hesitated. "He has not claimed the spoils. Varelia blinked. He has not touched us. No, he sleeps alone. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice colder than glass, she said, "Bring him to me. I will see for myself what kind of creature has defeated a god," and walked away from a throne. Far below, in the quiet stone halls of the victor's quarters, the human sat cross-legged on the floor, cleaning his blade with a cloth. He did not look up when the guards came. He had been waiting, and he smiled. But only a little. The chamber was quiet when he entered. The human walked between the two guards without fear, his boots tapping gently on the polished black stone. He didn't wear armor anymore. It's just plain gray fabric and a long coat taken from one of the dead, tailored to fit but rough at the edges. A symbol of nothing. Worn by a man who needed no title, at the far end of the room stood Empress Varelia. She wore a high royal collar, black and gold silk flowing down like a waterfall behind her. Her silver circlet gleamed above, sharp, intelligent. Eyes around her stood the high-ranking handmaidens, the ones sworn to die if she ordered it. The same ones, now legally bound to him. The law said she belonged to him now. She had never belonged to anyone. He stopped 6 steps away, folded his hands behind his back, and looked her in the eye. That same unshaken calm. No arrogance, no submission. Just silence like deep water. "Human," she said, her voice smooth and even. "You've been summoned. Do you understand why?" He nodded once. "'Cause you don't understand me." Varelia's jaw tightened. She had spent the last hour replaying every law, every custom, every possible escape from the humiliation of her position. She had considered poison, an ambush, even ritual suicide. But the Empire was watching, billions of eyes. If she ran, she would be weak. If she begged, she would be broken. If she fought again, she might die, and still. This man stood before her like he hadn't done anything important at all. She took a step closer. "You defeated my champion. Do you know what that means to my people?" "Yes," he replied. "It means you're now ruled by the one you underestimated." A few of the maids flinched. Varelia's eyes narrowed. "You think you rule me?" "I think your law says I do," he said. "But I didn't come here to own you." Her lips parted slightly.
That answer
didn't make sense. He continued, "Your people called me a beast. They threw me in that pit, expecting to see blood. I gave them what they asked for." "You killed him like he was nothing," she said sharply. "He was stronger, faster, louder," the human interrupted. "He was louder. And too proud. To learn." The Empress's voice rose now, the ice cracking beneath it. "He was a symbol, a god of war to us." "He was a blunt hammer," the human said. "Good for crushing weak men, not built to fight someone who thinks." Varelia took another step forward. She was close now, close enough to see the small scar under his left eye. Not a new one. Old. Precise. She wondered how many times he had bled before learning how not to. "You've claimed me by law," she said, "but you refuse to touch me. Is this mercy or mockery?" The human met her gaze and finally said, with a slow breath, "I don't want concubines." That stunned her. The room seemed to shift. "I want answers," he added. "And I want to understand why you've built an empire on chains and fear when you have the stars in your hands." The maids looked at one another, unsure whether to lower their heads or listen more closely. Varelia stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked to a long window. The city stretched out before her, all glowing towers and flying vessels, a world built on precision and pride. "You think we are cruel," she said. "But do you know how many enemies we have crushed to keep peace? You know how many rebellions we've silenced so we could build this?" He stepped beside her, his voice quiet now. "Peace through domination isn't peace. It's sleepwalking into collapse." She didn't answer. Not yet. They stood there for what felt like minutes. Just silence. Then she spoke, her voice softer than before. "My people think strength is shown by what you take, but you took nothing." He turned to look at her fully. "I only take what's offered," he said. Something in her shifted. A crack in the stone. But just then the door slammed open. A breathless guard stumbled in. Blood on his armor, he fell to one knee. "My Empress, forgive me." There's movement in the lower ring, unmarked banners, not ours, Aurelia's. Face turned hard. How many? Unknown. But they carry the crest of the old houses. The ones your champion destroyed years ago. She turned to the human. "You've started something," she said. He nodded. "Looks like I finished something too." And without another word, he reached for his blade and walked past the guards, not like a conqueror, but like a soldier heading back to the war, deep in the city's shadows. The old enemies of the Empire moved through smoke and sewers. They had waited years for a sign of weakness. The champion was dead. The Empress was dishonored. The time had come, and they did not yet know that the man they planned to kill was already walking toward them, with calm eyes, and a blade that had already ended a god. The night air in the capital city of Xeraxis was electric, not with celebration, but with a strange, quiet unease. The people did not cheer the champion's death. They whispered about it, some in fear, others in fascination. Rumors spread like wildfire. The human had not claimed a throne. The Empress still lived. The royal maids were untouched, but perhaps the most dangerous rumor of all, he had spared her. In the palace, everything was watching, not with loyalty, but calculation. Old nobles who had once bowed low now studied the Empress with careful eyes. The man who had once held back enemies with raw strength was gone, and what remained? A ruler bound by her own law, standing side by side with the man who had defeated her symbol of power. They didn't know what to make of it, and that made them afraid. In her private chamber, Varelia stood before a mirror, unmoving. She had dismissed her guards. Even the handmaidens waited outside. She was alone, except for him. The human sat across the room in silence, cleaning his blade once again, not out of habit, but discipline. His movements were patient, precise. Varelia had watched soldiers clean weapons before battles, but this felt different. "You always prepare like this," she said, still facing her reflection. "Even when there is no battle yet." "There's always a battle coming," he replied calmly. She turned, her expression unreadable. "Tell me something, Taryn. Why didn't you kill me when you had the right?" He looked up at her, no smile, no hesitation. "Because I didn't come here for blood," he said. "I came here to survive. And now, I stay to understand." Varelia walked closer, stopping a few paces away. "You think you can understand me, my empire? You think your mercy makes you better than us?" "No," he said, "but it makes me different." She studied his face again, not just the scars or the quiet fire in his eyes, but the restraint. That strange, silent strength that didn't need to prove itself. It's unsettling, and maybe worse. It was beginning to inspire. She had seen how her maids looked at him now, not with fear, but curiosity. One of them, Lyra, had spoken out of turn earlier in the day, praising the human's calmness. That would have meant lashes in the past. Instead, Varelia had said nothing. Not because she agreed, but because she wasn't sure how to respond. It changed something in them. In her, but outside these walls, change was seen as weakness, and weakness would be tested. A voice cracked through the palace line, panicked, high alert. Movement detected near the outer gates, unknown forces, 3 attack drones down. Pete perimeter breached. Varelia turned instantly. Where? Eastern. Courtyard. Direct route to the inner throne hall. The human was already on his feet, blade sheathed, coat swept over his shoulder. She stared at him. "They're coming for me." "No," he said. "They're coming for the vacuum your champion left behind. You just happened to be standing in it." Without waiting, he moved toward the doors. She followed. Outside the halls of the palace were chaos. Guards rushing in formation, servants screaming, nobles vanishing behind armored walls. Smoke began to rise from the lower towers as explosions shook the ground. The attackers were fast rebels from the forgotten provinces, backed by old bloodlines who had waited decades for revenge. They had no mercy. They wanted the Empress dead. They wanted the law shattered. And above all, they wanted to show the galaxy that the humans' victory meant nothing. They came in waves. Masked warriors with plasma rifles and bladed claws. Dozens, then hundreds. And standing alone at the top of the palace stairs, ... was him. The humans stood in their path like stone. They laughed at first. One stepped forward, raised a rifle. He moved. Too fast. A blur of motion, flash of metal, and the first attacker fell, throat cut. Weapon clattering to the stone, then he was in them, silent, deadly, efficient. He didn't roar, he didn't posture. He killed. Every strike was clean, controlled. Arms disabled, knees shattered, throats opened. It wasn't rage. It was execution. The rebels began to hesitate. Then they began to fall back. Up on the balcony, Aurelia watched, frozen in awe and horror. Her guards had barely moved before he had already cut down 10 men. The man they had mocked as a slave was fighting like a war machine. No, not a machine. Like a man who had done this 1,000 times before and didn't need to prove anything anymore. And then suddenly, it was over. Bodies littered the marble steps. Smoke rose. The human stood alone, his coat torn. Blood streaked across his face. He didn't look at the Empress. He only wiped the blade clean, turned away. But she couldn't look away, because in that moment, Empress Aurelia knew the truth. If he had wanted to take her empire for himself, there was no one left who could have stopped him. And yet, walked away again. What kind of power was that? Why, in all her centuries of rule, had she never seen it before? The fires burned long after the last scream faded. The rebels were gone, either dead or retreating into the dark corners of the city. Their bodies lined the palace stairs like a warning written in blood. No one spoke of rebellion now, not tonight, but the empire had changed, and the silence that followed felt heavier than war. Inside the healing chamber, the human sat shirtless on a steel table, his torso wrapped in nanoweave bandages. Deep cuts stretched across his side and back already. Closing under the slow hum of the med drone, a bruise bloomed purple beneath his ribs. One blade had come too close. He hadn't flinched when it hit him. He didn't flinch now. Empress Aurelia stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching him through shadow. He hadn't noticed her yet, or maybe he had and simply didn't care. Either possibility unsettled her. She had spent a lifetime commanding the attention of everyone in the room. This man, this human, defied that without a word. "You bled for me," she said quietly. He didn't look up. "I bled because your people were dying. Just happened to be standing between them and a knife. Don't reduce it. You could have left. No one would have blamed you." He glanced at her now, expression unreadable. "I don't fight for thanks, and I don't run." Aurelia took a step forward. The chamber was dim, lit only by the slow pulse of healing lights. For a moment she looked younger, not softer but tired. She had ruled so long that she had forgotten what it meant to see someone do the right thing without asking for power in return. "You've made them question me," she said. "My court, my nobles, even my own handmaidens," they whisper behind. "My back now." Wondering why the Empress still rules when a stranger does her fighting, he let out a low breath. Then maybe they should rule themselves. Her eyes narrowed. "You mock me." "No," he said. "I'm saying power that depends on fear isn't power. It's a leash. The people holding it are just as chained." She didn't respond, because deep down, she knew he was right. The weight of her rule, her law, her image had become a prison even she couldn't escape. She had created a system where strength was worshipped, where she was mocked. Now the one man who followed neither had defeated the heart of her empire and refused to sit on its throne. "You confuse them?" she said. "I'm not here to be." "Understood," he replied. "I'm here because your people need more than fear. They need hope." She stared at him for a long time. Then walked over to the table and placed something beside him. A thin strip of black gold metal shaped like a dagger. It was her personal seal, the symbol of command. "You saved me," she said, "and by law, I should now give myself to you, fully, my throne, my life, my body." The human looked at the seal but didn't move to take it. She stepped closer, almost a whisper now. "But I won't, not because I refuse. but because I want to know if you'll take it, only because I offer it. He looked up slowly. What are you offering? He asked. My trust, she said. And maybe one day, something more. But not because the law says I'm yours, because I choose to be. There it was, not command, not surrender, choice. The most dangerous thing in an empire built on obedience. He reached out, picked up the seal, and placed it gently back in her hand. I don't need this, he said, but keep it. Maybe one day you'll use it for something better. She nodded, a strange heat in her chest she hadn't felt in decades. Then the door burst open. It was Lyra, the youngest of the handmaidens, eyes wide with fear. My empress. She gasped. There's news. From the outer systems. Varelia turned sharply. Speak. It's not rebels this time. It's the Confederacy. They've moved a fleet near the edge of our space. No warning, no message, just silence. The human stood. His wounds weren't fully healed, but his movements were smooth. Practiced. They think you're weak, he said. They think you've lost control. Lyra looked between them. Should we send ships? No, Varelia replied, her eyes meeting the human's. Not yet. The human tilted his head. What's the play? She stepped closer to him. Voice steady. We let them send a message, and then, she smiled, just a little. Then we send you. The human nodded once, slowly. Outside, the night sky pulsed with stars, each one a promise of new enemies, new wars, new choices, and somewhere in that vast silence, the next challenge was already watching. The stars looked peaceful from the Empress's high tower, but beyond the glittering glass, far out where sensors whispered and long-range beacons blinked, war was moving. The Confederacy fleet drifted at the edge of known space like a patient. Knife. No demands, no warnings, just silence. A test. They were waiting to see how the Shirani Empire would respond now that its champion was dead and its empress had not claimed vengeance. Weakness was a language, and in the void it was spoken. Fluently inside the war chamber, Empress Varelia stood before a floating map. Red dots, fleet movements, intercept paths. The room buzzed with quiet voices, advisors, admirals, nobles pretending not to be afraid. He stood beside her. The human didn't speak. He watched the map with a calm expression, arms folded, gaze sharp. He had seen this before, a show. Of strength from an enemy not yet ready to strike, but hoping you'd make the first mistake, an admiral pointed to a glowing zone. We deploy now. Cut them off before they spread. Another noble shook his head. If we do that, they'll paint us as aggressors. We need diplomatic cover. She should stay hidden, someone muttered, just loud enough to be heard. She's already surrendered once. Why make her visible? The human turned his head slowly. The room fell silent. The noble who spoke looked down, pretending he hadn't said anything. Varelia didn't flinch. She had grown used to whispers. But today she didn't ignore them. Speak plainly. She said coldly. No one answered. So the human did. You're all so desperate to protect your pride that you've forgotten how to protect your people. The admiral scowled. You speak of protecting, but you're not one of us. No, the human said, stepping forward. I'm the reason any of you are still breathing. The room held its breath. Varelia spoke again, her voice low. Leave. Us. They obeyed. Even the bold ones. Now, it was just the two of them in the chamber. The stars blinking beyond the glass. You didn't have to say that, she told him. Yes, I did, he replied, 'cause they won't say it. But they're all thinking. Varelia walked slowly toward the map. Her reflection hovered on the polished floor beneath her. I ruled through fear for so long I forgot what respect even sounds like. He watched her, not as a soldier or a conqueror, but as someone trying to understand a puzzle too complicated for war. You're not weak, he said. But you've built an empire that only respects strength when it bleeds. And now I've bled, she whispered. He didn't correct her, instead. He walked to the map, pointing to the outer system where the Confederacy ships were hiding. I've seen these tactics before, he said. They'll use drones to scan planetary response times. Look for delay. Divide your fleets across multiple entry points. Spread you thin. Then strike hard when your resources are split. Verelia narrowed her eyes. How do you know? What? Fought them once. Not with your kind. Long before this. They don't conquer planets. They choke them. So what do we do? He didn't answer right away. Simply stared at the map for a long time then. You don't attack them. Frowned. Explain. You send me, she blinked. Alone. He nodded. One ship. A fast one. Not a war vessel. A dock with their command carrier. I asked to speak with their admiral. And then what? She asked carefully. Then I tell them a story. She stepped back. They'll kill you on sight. No, he said calmly. They won't. Because I'm the man who killed your god of war. And they're here to test your weaknesses. But if I show up alone, and they can't stop me, it proves the opposite. She stared at him. There was madness in the plan. But beneath it, there was something else. A dangerous kind of logic. And something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, he continued, if I fail, you've lost nothing. If I succeed, they pull back. Not out of fear of your fleets, but because they don't understand me. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, and what do you gain? Return to Ward. Her slowly, a galaxy that understands strength doesn't always look like war. The next morning, the skies opened. A single ship, sleek, fast. An unarmed shot from the royal hangars like a silver arrow. It carried no banners, no escort, only one man inside. The Confederacy command vessel registered the approach and locked weapons instantly. But they did not fire, because the man who stood calmly in their hangar bay, unarmed and alone, was a myth they'd only heard in whispers. A human who had split the Shirani war champion in half. Human the Empress hadn't dared to kill. Human who had no army, and didn't need one. He walked toward them, slowly, hands at his sides. Like someone with nothing to prove, the Confederacy admiral stepped forward, flanked by armored guards. What are you? The admiral asked. The human smiled just a little. Your next mistake. The Confederacy guards didn't move. Their rifles were aimed, fingers on triggers, muscles tense, but none of them fired. The human had walked straight into their stronghold, alone, unarmed, and unwelcome. And yet not one of them could find the courage to pull the trigger. Because legends, when they stand in front of you, look less like stories and more like decisions. The admiral stared at him. Tall, slender, almost elegant, with silver eyes and skin like polished obsidian. The Confederacy was known for its calm precision, but even she had trouble masking her curiosity. You came alone, she said. The human gave a small nod. No fleet. No demands. Not even armor, she added. Why? He took one step closer, and the guards flinched, just slightly. I didn't come to threaten, he said. I came to make you think. About what? The admiral asked. He looked around. The hangar at the rows of warships outside the blast windows, engines humming softly in cold readiness. This, he said, is quiet waiting. This show of force. It's hunger for a weak moment. You came expecting fear. You lost your champion, she replied. Your empress is wounded. Your court trembles. No, he said simply. You don't understand what happened. There was something in his voice, something not loud but solid. The voice of someone who had buried comrades, fought for things that couldn't be rebuilt, lived through things that most wouldn't. Survive. He stepped again. Now, just a few feet from the admiral. Your mistake, he said, was thinking killing the strongest man in the Empire would create a power vacuum. But it didn't. The admiral raised an eyebrow. No, he shook his head. It revealed what power actually looks like. She folded her arms. And what is that exactly? Restraint, he said. Discipline. Choosing not to take what you have the right to? She paused. His eyes didn't blink. Tell me something, Terran, she said slowly. If you had taken the Empress, the throne, her court, the Empire, would they have stopped you? No, he said. But they wouldn't have followed me either. The Admiral looked away for a moment, as if considering something far beyond the room. Then she said, You know what we saw? When your name came across our fleet data, we waited. We saw a man who shattered an empire's face with a single strike, then refused to wear its crown. She looked back at him. That's not peacekeeping. That's myth-making. He smiled only faintly. Maybe, he said, but myths last longer than fleets. For a long time, no one spoke. Then, she nodded to her officers. Stand down. The rifles lowered. The tension broke like glass hitting stone. The Admiral took one step forward. Her tone was colder now, but respectful. This is not surrender, but it is. A pause. He nodded once. That's all I came for. If we come again? She asked. The smile faded from his face. Then I won't come alone. Return to Xeraxis was quiet, almost surreal. His ship docked in the Royal Bay. No fanfare, no trumpet of horns. Just soft lights in the hangar and the sound of boots on metal. Empress Virelia was already there waiting. She wore no crown, no armor, just a dark robe and her eyes sharp as ever, but tired in a way that only rulers understand. You're alive, she said, as if she hadn't dared believe it until now. He walked toward her, stopping at a respectful distance. They listened, he said. She raised an eyebrow. Listened or feared? Both, he said. But they're not moving. Not for now. She was quiet. And then she laughed, a short, soft sound that surprised even her. You walked into a warship unarmed, she said, and came back. With silence? That's not diplomacy. That's insanity. He shrugged. Worked, didn't it? She studied him again. It's a strange creature. Not a soldier, not a king. It's just human. But somehow larger than anything she had built. She stepped closer. I want to ask you something, she said. Ask. If you had never been thrown into the arena, would you still be here now? No, he said. But you would still be afraid of everything you built. She nodded slowly, then reached into her robe and handed him something. It was the seal again, her personal symbol of rule. He looked at it in her hand. What changed? He asked. She met his eyes. You won me by law, she said. But now, I give myself. By choice. He didn't take the seal. Instead, he stepped forward and closed her hand over it. I never needed to own you, he said. I only needed to know you could choose. They stood there for a long time. No guards, no court, no law. Just a human who had come from nothing and an empress who had finally learned what real power meant. Far above, stars blinked. Peace was fragile. But for now, it held. And somewhere in the darkness, in the memory of a dead champion and a silent crowd, a new legend was born. Not of a conqueror, not of a king, but of a man who could have taken everything and chose not to. The crowd roared as the steel gates opened. High above them, in a golden throne, sat Empress Virelia.
Ow.
Her eyes sparkled with pride.
Ow.
Around her, alien nobles cheered and chanted the name of their champion, Corzel, a massive warrior with scales. Like black iron and eyes that glowed red, no one had ever defeated him. Not in 10 years. Not even close. Corzel was a living weapon, trained since birth to kill. He had broken bones with his fists and crushed skulls beneath his boots. The Empress had watched him rise, fight, and destroy every challenger. Her glory, her power, made flesh. Today, he would face something different. A human. The crowd booed as the second gate opened. The human stepped out wearing simple armor made from alien scraps. He was tall, lean, and silent. His name was not known, nor did anyone care to learn it, to the alien empire. Humans were weak, useful for mining, menial labor, or cannon fodder. They were emotional, soft, and wild. No real warrior. But this human walked with calm confidence. His eyes were sharp and cold, like a blade ready to strike. He didn't speak. He didn't flinch at the crowd's insults. He only looked ahead at Korzel. The Empress smiled. This would be entertaining. The horns sounded. The match began. Korzel charged like a beast. His heavy axe slammed into the ground where the human had just stood. Dust flew. The crowd roared. The human moved back, quick on his feet, barely making a sound. The Empress leaned forward. Something was strange. Most challengers screamed or begged. This one was silent, focused. Korzel attacked again. A wide swing meant to cut the human in half. The human ducked and rolled. He didn't try to strike back yet. He studied his enemy. The champion laughed, raising his axe again. "Fight me, little thing!" Wowing voice, still not in his deep, growling voice. Still, the human stayed silent. He waited, watched, measured. Minutes passed. Korzel grew angry. Swings became faster, stronger, but also wilder. The human stayed just out of reach every time. The crowd's cheers began to change. Some were now confused. Others were silent. Even the Empress narrowed her eyes. Something was wrong. The human wasn't afraid. He was planning something suddenly. The human moved in too fast. One moment he was standing still. The next he was under the champion's guard. His short blade flashed, cutting across Korzel's leg. A deep wound. Blood splashed onto the ground. Korzel roared in pain. The crowd gasped. The human backed away again, his breathing steady. He didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He only waited for the next move. The champion was angry now, his face twisted. With rage, he charged again, lifting his axe high. The human didn't run this time. He stood still. The Empress stood up from her. Thrown, everything slowed down. The champion brought his axe down with all his strength, aiming to crush the human once and for all. And in that final moment, the human moved, just a step, a small one, but perfectly timed. The axe missed, and the human's blade struck forward once. Clean and fast, right into Korzel's chest, straight through the heart. Silenced, the champion stood still for a second, eyes wide with shock. Then he dropped to his knees, then to the ground. Dead. The arena was quiet. No one had ever seen Korzel fall. No one thought it was possible, and yet his lifeless body lay there, the human standing above him. Calm as ever, the Empress stared. Frozen, her heart raced. She had just watched her champion, her pride split in half by a human, a slave. Nobody. And according to the old laws of her world, she knew what would come next. If her champion was defeated, the victor had the right to claim the spoils. Her throne, her guards even, herself. The human turned and looked up at her. He didn't raise his blade. He didn't say a word, but his eyes said everything. The Empress felt something she had never felt before.